Hello, I am Namata Miriam and I'm going to be discussing the economies and diseconomies of scale as well as the returns to scale. So in the long run, firms are concerned about output optimization as well as the minimization of the costs. Costs of production depend on both the internal factors. These are factors that arise within the firm as well as the external factors that arise from outside the firm. Internal and external economies and diseconomies of scale determine the trend in the cost of production. So economies of scale lead to cost saving, while the diseconomies of scale lead to rise in the costs. Economies and diseconomies of scale also determine the returns to scale, in that when the economies of scale are greater than the diseconomies of scale, we'll have increasing returns to scale. But when the diseconomies of scale are greater than the economies of scale, we shall have decreasing returns to scale. So there is the long run average cost curve. So under this curve, the average costs of production reduce as a result of the economies of scale, and this is shown by the decreasing long run average cost curve. And when the long run average cost curve is increasing, that is, the average costs are increasing with more output, we shall have the diseconomies of scale. The average cost is increasing. So economies of scale. So economies of scale is the fall in the average cost of production, and is the fall in the average cost of production as the scale of production and the output increases. So this is categorized into two, that is the internal economies of scale and the external economies of scale. Internal economies of scale, these are the economies of scale that arise within the firm with the addition of new production plants. These are exclusively available to the expanding firm. And here we have economies of production, economies in marketing, managerial economies, and the economies in transport and storage. So economies of production arise from two sources, that is the technological advances and then the advantages of division of labor based on specialization and skill. So under the technological advances, large-scale production gives an opportunity to the expanding firm to avail the advantages of technological advances. Advanced technology makes it possible to conceive the whole process of production of a commodity in one composite unit. For example, when we are looking at the composite dairy scheme, we shall have the chilling, processing, and bottling all under one unit in the large-scale production, other than having these different units spread under different farms which are under small-scale production. So when the scale of production expands, farms tend to hire more capital and more labor, and their total output increases more proportionately till, of course, the optimum size of the farm is reached. This reduces the cost of production. Under the advantages of division of labor and specialization, when a farm's production Production scale increases, more workers with varying skills and qualifications are employed. So with large numbers of workers, this gives firms an opportunity to divide their labor accordingly based on their qualifications, knowledge, experience, and expertise, and assign them functions where they are best suited. So this is really known as division of labor. So it increases the productivity of labor and thereby reduces the cost of production. Specialized workers are able to develop more efficient tools and techniques and also gain speed of their work. So the disadvantages of division of labor: improve productivity of labor, which decreases the average cost of production. Under the economies of marketing, so we have economies in advertisement costs. When the farm is increasing its scale of production, output increases, but the costs of advertisement do not increase as much as the increase in output. So you find that there are reduced costs of production based on the output which is increasing, and thereby we have the economies of scale. Then another way economies of marketing are obtained is through economies in large-scale distribution through wholesalers. So you find that the cost of distributing output are reduced since you're distributing to wholesalers and not distributing to many retailers or consumers. So managerial economies of scale. So here we have specialization in the managerial activities, that is the use of specialized managerial personnel, and the systemization of the managerial functions. For large size firms, it becomes possible to divide its management into specialized departments and specialized personnel. For example, we shall have the production manager, sales manager, human resource manager, and the finance manager. So it increases the efficiency of management at all levels of production because the decision making is decentralized. So this increases production. And large-scale firms also have an opportunity to use advanced techniques of communication, for example, telephones and other forms of communication. And these lead to quick decision making, which saves the valuable time of management. And this improves on the managerial efficiency. So managerial cost increases less than proportionately with the increase in the production of scale. And this enables these firms which are expanding the scale of production to enjoy the economies of scale. Then we have economies in transport and storage, whereby large-scale firms are able to fully utilize their transport and storage facilities. These storage facilities for both the raw materials as well as the finished products. So these large-scale firms are able to acquire their own means of transport, thereby reducing the unit cost of transporting the raw materials and also the finished products. So this is reduced mainly to the extent of the profit margin of the transport companies that they would have hired to do the transport for them. So this prevents also the delays in the transporting of the raw materials and the output, and therefore the farms enjoy the economies of scale. Another form of economies of scale is the external economies of scale, and these arise outside the firm and they appear in the form of money saving on inputs. So these accrue to the large size firms in the form of discounts and concessions on the large scale purchase of raw materials, large scale acquisition of external finance, particularly from the commercial banks, massive advertising campaigns, and large scale hiring of the means of transport, as well as warehouses. So these benefits are available to all firms in the industry, but large-scale firms derive more benefits compared to the small firms. So expansion of the firm of an industry encourages the growth of also ancillary industries that supply inputs. In a competitive market, input prices go down in this case, and thereby, so when input prices go down, the cost of production are reduced. So the benefits of decreasing input prices are only available to the expanding firm in addition to the discounts and the concessions that they are able to enjoy. So the competition between these firms, the ancillary firms, leads to the law of increasing returns, thereby reducing the cost of production. So we have diseconomies of scale. Diseconomies of scale are the advantages that arise due to the expansion of production scale beyond its optimum level and lead to a rise in the cost of production. So we have two categories of the diseconomies of scale. Like in the economies of scale, we have the internal diseconomies and the external diseconomies of production. Internal diseconomies of production. So these arise from within the firm and they are exclusive to a firm which is raising its scale of production. So these limits are reached when the advantages of labor and managerial staff have been fully exploited, excess capacity of the plant, the warehouses, transport and communication systems, and also the economy on the advertisement also wears off. So we have internal diseconomies of scale mainly due to two reasons, that is the managerial inefficiency and the labor inefficiency. Managerial inefficiency. So here diseconomies of scale first appear at the management level. So with the first expansion of the scale of production, personal contacts and communication between the owners and the managers, between the managers and the labor, between the managers of the different departments also reduces. So the lack of the first communication delays the decision making, thereby affecting production. Close control and supervision are also replaced by remote control. So increase in the managerial personnel decision making becomes complex and it delays the decision making. The implementation of the decisions that are taken is also delayed due to the coordination problem in large-scale industry and the large-scale settings. And also management is professionalized beyond a point. Instead of looking at the owner's objective of profit maximization, managers also look at their utility function, for example, their job security, the high salary, their standard or reasonable profit target, and also satisfying their other functions. So all these lead to a laxity in the management and increase in the cost of production. Under labor inefficiency, increasing the number of labor leads to a loss of control over labor management. So lack of labor control affects the production very much. So we have that increase in the number of workers also leads to labor union activities. This leads to a loss of output time, the loss of time they would have spent working, and therefore we have reduced output per unit of time, and also this lead to an increase in the cost of production. Another form of diseconomies of scale is the external diseconomies of scale, and these are the advantages that arise outside the farm, especially in the input markets, due to natural constraints, especially in the agriculture sector. The farm has no control over. They arise from outside the farm. So when all the farms of the industry are expanding, the discounts and the concessions that are available on the bulk purchases of inputs, they come to one end, because most of the farms in the industry are increasing their production, and most of them need these discounts. So the discounts come to one end. Then also the increasing demand for inputs puts pressure on the input markets, and the input prices begin to rise, because an increase in demand leads to an increase in the prices. Yeah. So there's also an excessive use of the fixed resources. For example, in agriculture, we have excessive use of the cultivable land for production makes it barren, and therefore the returns will keep producing. Then maybe another example is also on the fishing sector. When you increase the fishing, the more you increase on the scale of fishing, the catch of the fish will not increase according to the increase in the scale of fishing. So those are the arise out of the excessive use of the resources, especially natural resources. So we have the law of returns to scale. The long run production leads to the laws of returns to scale. The laws of returns to scale explain the kind of change in output in the response to the proportional and simultaneous change in inputs. Increasing inputs proportionately and simultaneously is in fact an expansion of the scale of production. So when farm expands its scale of production, it increases both the inputs in a certain proportion. So there are three possibilities to the increase in production. We have total output may increase more than proportionately. Total output may increase proportionately, and then the total output may increase less than proportionately. And these give rise to three laws of returns to scale. That is the law of increasing returns to scale, the law of constant returns to scale, and the law of diminishing returns to scale. So in production, this is the most common sequence that is followed. First, there is increasing returns to scale. Second, the constant returns to scale, and the diminishing returns to scale as we increase the scale of production. The law of increasing returns to scale. So when we increase inputs K and L, that is capital and labor, proportionately, and also the output increases more than proportionately, this shows a law of increasing returns to scale. If capital and labor increased 2 times, that is, they are doubled, the resultant output is more than doubled. The law of increasing returns to scale here is in operation. As we can see, lines OB and OC represent the expansion path. So when we have the movement from point A to point B along the expansion line means that there is doubling of the inputs. So the combination increase from 1K to 2K, 1K, from 1K and to 2K, and also from 10L to 20L means that input has been doubled. But then we are seeing an increase in the output from 10 to 25, which means that output has more than doubled. So this shows an increase in the returns to scale. Output increases more than proportionately to the increase in input. So this relationship between inputs and outputs shows that the law of increasing returns to scale. So there are factors behind the increasing returns to scale, which are the technical and managerial indivisibilities, the higher degree of specialization, and then the dimensional relations. So the technical and managerial indivisibilities, so certain outputs, particularly the mechanical equipment and managers that are used in the process of production, are available only in a given size. Such inputs cannot be subdivided into parts to match with small scale of production. For example, you cannot have half a tractor, you cannot have half combined harvester. Yeah, so you have to use these inputs in their totality. So in regard to the managerial power, if the scale of production in small, managers remain underemployed, because you cannot employ half a manager, you're going to employ the whole manager, but if they're not being fully utilized, it is up to the owner of the farm. So if the manager cannot accept part-time job of being a manager, you cannot hire him in smaller quantities. And because of this indivisibility in the machinery and managers, this give a state of technology that they are employed in a minimum quantity, even if the scale of production is much less than the capacity output. So when the scale of production is expanded by increasing all the inputs, the scale of production of invisible factors increases exponentially because of the technical advantage. And therefore, the increasing productivity of the individual inputs gives increasing returns to scale. So you cannot have half of those, you cannot divide those factors into different parts to suit the size of the farm. And yet when you increase the size of the farm, you're able to fully utilize them, and thereby you have increasing returns to scale. The other law of returns to scale is the law of constant returns. Sorry, I'd forgotten to talk about the higher degree of specialization. So we have an automatic improvement in the degree of specialization of both the labor and machinery, makes it possible to increase the scale of production. So the use of specialized labor that is best suited for a particular kind of job, and also the use of machinery increases both labor and capital per unit of inputs. Their cumulative effects contribute to increasing returns to scale. The increasing scale of production necessitates the employment of specialized managerial personnel, and also this contributes a great deal to the output. Under the dimensional relations, increasing returns to scale is a matter of dimensional improvement. For example, when you look at the length and width of the room, when you double this length and width of the room, you find that the area is more than doubled. For example, if you have 15 centimeters by 10 centimeters, you will have 150 as your area. But when you double these dimensions from 15 centimeters, the length to 30 centimeters, and from 10 centimeters to 20 centimeters of width, you get 600, and 600 compared to 150, it is more than doubled. So this relationship happens also when you look at the labor and capital, and therefore output is more than doubled when you look at it in the dimension relations. Yeah, moving on to the constant returns to scale. So output here increases in proportion to the increase in inputs. If, for example, we are to double the inputs, capital and labor, the level of output also is doubled. So the lines OA and OB under the expansion paths that are indicating to hypothetical techniques of production with optimum capital labor ratio. So when you look at an increase in capital from 1K to 2K, and an increase in labor from 10K to 20K, you will have this output doubled from 10 to 20. So it has also just doubled, which shows there is an constant returns to scale. So the constant returns to scale is attributed to the limits of the economies of scale. With the expansion of the scale of production, economies arise from such factors as indivisibility of fixed factors, greater possibility of specialization of capital and labor, and the use of more efficient techniques of production. But these have a limit to the economies of scale. So when the economies of scale reach their maximum, and the diseconomies of scale are yet to come in, there is that period where we have the constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale take place when factors of production are perfectly divisible, and when the technology is such that capital and labor ratio is fixed. So when factors of production are perfectly divisible, the production function is homogeneous, and it shows constant returns to scale. The other law of returns to scale is the diminishing returns to scale, and whereby on this curve, a proportionate increase in in inputs lead to a less than proportionate increase in output. For example, when we are to look at these curves, we have an increase in capital from 1k to 2k and an increase in labor from 10k to 20k. That is after we have doubled this capital and labor, we get an increase in output, which is from 10 to 18 units. This shows that the proportion of increase in the quantity produced when we double the inputs has reduced. Yes, so when the inputs are doubled and the output is less than doubled, we are seeing the decreasing returns to scale. So the causes of the diminishing returns to scale, these are attributed to the diseconomies of scale. Most important factor which causes the diminishing returns to scale is the diminishing return to management. That is the managerial diseconomies of scale, like we have seen. As the firm expands, the managerial efficiency declines. And then the other is the limitedness and exhaustibility of natural resources. For example, like we talked about in agriculture, we have land, but once you double the usage of the land, once you double, it's not going to double the increase in output. So you find that this limits the productivity, and hence we have the decreasing returns to scale. Thank you.